And then I was out of my body and I was looking down at everybody and they were working on me. They were defibrillating me. I felt complete. I felt like I had awakened for the first time in my life. I didn't feel any pain. I didn't have any confusion. And I knew that my body was dead. I knew that I killed myself with my thoughts.
Welcome, everybody. This week on our podcast, we invited David Williamson to talk with us. We put our video of his near-death experience onto our channel last. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's incredible. David lives in Atlanta, Georgia, and he tells his story of growing up as a Black man in the South and grappling with the racial tensions in America. He talks about a lot of the anger he held and the worldview that he lived in. And he believes that that anger and that hate actually led to his heart attack and killed him. During his near-death experience, he shares an incredible story of being in space, feeling love, unconditional love, and connection with all people, all beings, and being an orb of light as a soul. So today, my brother and I talk with him. He unpacks that experience, how it changed his life. And we invite you to give a listen. And if you're interested, check out the film, the video that we put out on his story. So enjoy. Welcome, David.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on our podcast.
Yes, thanks for having me.
For the audience, in a moment, I'll ask you to kind of recap and briefly describe your near-death experience. You are our last film that we released on our channel. And for anyone that hasn't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's a pretty incredible story. And people seem to really resonate with it and love it. I was curious, we haven't checked in since we interviewed you. How's it been for you, kind of seeing the launch of the film and the comments? What's that been like?
Man, it's been surreal. Like you mentioned, reading the comments and seeing how many comments, seeing how many views it's received, like over 360,000, I think now. The response from people who just want to reach out and talk and ask questions, and it's been surreal. I mean, the hopelessness that I developed that led to my near-death experience, that led to my body, kind of breaking down, is related to not being seen, related to feeling invisible, related to not, feeling like nothing that I thought or cared about really mattered. And to see this response to just me simply sharing my story has been overwhelming, and it's correcting that internal narrative that I've had for years. That my thoughts and my opinions and the things that I value don't matter. I'm seeing the impact that simply sharing my thoughts and my story, is having on people, and it matters. So that's healing in and of itself. Just seeing the comments, just reading the comments, just hearing the voices of people when they reach out and just want to talk. And sometimes it's extremely excited. And it's for me, I'm just a regular person, so seeing someone responding to me in that way it's surreal. I just want them to calm down and let's talk, and they're excited to have me on the phone, and it's amazing to me, because like I said, I've never viewed myself as in any other light except for, just a regular person trying to be a regular person, my whole life.
So have people been reaching out to you through your website or Facebook?
Yeah, through Facebook, Instagram, email. Yeah, they're finding me. However they're finding me, and it's and I'm glad, because the conversations, they're not just one way. They're not just one-sided. They're not just asking me a bunch of questions and I'm sharing, information that for whatever reason I seem to understand differently now. But they're actually, it's a two-way street. They, strangely enough, and it's happening a lot lately, is people talk to me and they use the exact same words that I feel inside of me, to describe stuff. And it's always fascinating because they're talking as though they're approaching me as if they're confused and they don't understand stuff, but they're using the same language that I use to explain reality. And I don't feel confused about what's happening here so much. I just feel that it's fast and you're not going to know it all. And you can be okay in that, without there having to, any confusion having to be a distraction. It's impossible to understand the vastness of the system without some level of confusion. So the confusion doesn't have to really matter, So But when I hear them speak, there is no confusion in the words that they're using to describe what's going on. They're speaking about everything with a clarity that I didn't have when I was going through my problems. So it's just interesting. They're way more advanced than I was when I was lost in my illusion. They see their illusion for what it is. So it's easy for me to it's only like 2 or 3 steps that they got to step outside of their story to see, how to find their way through it. If you already see the story with clarity, that's a cheat code. That's part of that's like half of the work. That's half the battle. Knowing, like G.I. Joe said, knowing is half the battle.
Well, first of all, David, it's incredible to watch the response to you and to this film. It's just amazing to see all these comments, and people are just moved and touched and inspired. And I think in particular, because you're talking to something that is tense in this country about race and racial relationships. And I think a lot of people feel a lot of kind of ways about it. So it's almost like no matter where you are on the spectrum of things, it's so touching and relieving to hear somebody talk and just really center love and kindness and understanding. And I think it's in short supply these days. So it's beautiful to see many people touched and moved, as well as people really rooting for you to get onto a radio and to use your voice more and write books, and people loving that. So anyway, I thought maybe we could ask you to just, for the audience, for anyone listening who hasn't seen the film yet and might not know about your NDE, maybe in a brief overview of what happened to you and what your story is about.
Sure. I guess the brief version is in my childhood, I was, exposed to a lot of racially polarizing, kind of ideas and experiences. And it kind of coaxed me into the race game, into hating people who hate me. And it just got, for me, it escalated and escalated into almost every aspect of my life. I was able to explain in a racially polarized way. I was able to justify a racially polarized perspective of experience and reality based upon my own personal trauma and personal experiences, the history that had been presented to me, the narratives that the news seems to center, which polarizes things along racial lines. So much of my experience, even outside of the upbringing around seeing the KKK marching and stuff like that, it just seemed to reinforce those narratives. So it was difficult for me to suspend my awareness of that narrative and to focus on something else, because it seemed like to me that the biggest obstacle that I had in my life and in any other person had was the race stuff. That was the only thing I seemed to focus on in this life. And in centering it, you definitely learn a lot about racial dynamics. But if you're learning from a very biased way, you don't really learn. You just kind of double down on your perspective. So in doubling down on my perspective, I just became extremely hateful, more hateful, and I felt it inside of me. I started having digestive issues, hypertension, and eventually I had a heart attack. So losing hope in humanity, losing hope in myself, feeling all this hate inside of me, it just broke my body down. It broke my body down. As soon as I started losing hope in humanity and in myself, I started dying slowly, and it was painful. It was I had gallstones, I had hypertension, I had hypertensive crises like pretty regularly, where my blood pressure would just spike, and I'm vomiting and going to the emergency room, and it won't go down for hours and hours and hours. Even while I'm intravenously being medicated, it was still spiking. And so I was just out of control inside of myself, and it was making my body respond in kind. It was out of control. So the heart attack occurred during one of those spikes, which coincided with a supermoon, which increases energy anyway. So I'm already on edge. Blood pressure's through the roof. Then the supermoon occurs, and my heart valve rips in that time. And 7 days later, because it didn't feel like anything happened in my heart, it felt like a muscle was ripped in my shoulder and in my back. It felt like back pain and shoulder pain. So I didn't really initially even relate it to my heart. It was no connection to my heart. I just went about my life, assuming that I was just having back and shoulder pain that was on 10, But I played football, and I mentioned I was stupid. If you're you're either injured or you're hurt. If you're hurt, get up and go, get back in the game. So I was trying to get back in the game, but 7 days later, I felt like a stinging in my heart, and I couldn't catch my breath. I couldn't keep my breath, and then eventually rushed to the emergency room, and I'm having a heart attack. As I get to the emergency room, I'm pretty much passing out slowly. I'm trying to breathe deeply to keep me from passing out because I'm getting dizzy. As soon as I'm on the gurney, I pass out. I roll to the side, and the last thought that I have is this is going to be some beautiful sleep, and I close my eyes and I'm gone. And that's even before I get into the emergency room. But once we're in there, where people were pushing me on the gurney, I can still see they're organized in that way, but I don't see them. I only see dots of light. It looks like a nighttime sky, but where the people are, you see the dots of light. And then that was just for a moment, and then I was out of my body, and I was looking down at everybody, and where the dots of light were, I could see that's where people were, again, and I could see them, and they were working on me. They were defibrillating me. There was a woman in the back of the room that was holding her face with both of her hands, and that really affected me because I wanted her to know that there was nothing happening that was bad. I felt complete. I felt like I had awakened for the first time in my life. I didn't feel any pain. I didn't have any confusion. And I knew that my body was dead. I knew that my body was dead. I knew that I killed myself with my thoughts. I knew that, and the words that I told myself was, his body, his mind, and his ego is dead. You used to be there. He's dead, Then I asked, well, what remains? And it was kind of like a bunch of words flooded in that were like soul, spirit, soul, spirit, awareness, light, energy. And these words kind of just flooded in at the same time. And it was clear, I appeared to be an orb of light. And I had no confusion. I watched them defibrillate me for a while, trying to resuscitate me for a while. And then I kind of just looked up, and then I was in blackness in space. And it appeared to be what people refer to as the void. Everything was alive. It was a very full place. It felt that the blackness was extremely black. Felt like velvet as I was moving through it. It actually felt tangible. The love, I felt love in that blackness, but I felt everything in that blackness as well. And when I came up out of that and I looked down into it, it appeared to be like a black hole, or the quote unquote void that people speak about. And when I looked into it, it had its own kind of unique behavior that was different than the other parts of space. This area, first of all, was blacker than space, so it immediately stood out. But then when I looked at it, there was a different behavior. Like I literally was like looking at everything. Like all confusion went away when you looked at it. It was like every possibility that existed was in that void, and I still seem to have a connection to it. Even coming back here, it seems to be a place that I'm tethered to in some ways. It never leaves my mind. So I'm looking in space. Everything's beautiful. I feel like love. Everything around me feels like love. I keep looking back into the emergency room at the woman that's holding her face because I really want to do something about her feeling that way. I want her to feel differently. And I think that just because I'm looking at her, it created the possibility of me having the experience back there, because I believe that wherever your attention is, that's where you're creating an experience. So me keeping my attention on her and wanting to explain to her that everything was beautiful, it created the possibility for me having an experience back on Earth. And because she just seemed to be tethering me or holding me to Earth. And with her compassion and her love for me, it seemed to hold me there and hold my attention. So they finally resuscitated me, and the first words as I blurred out were, "Are you okay?" And I'm looking for her to just see if she's okay. But I don't even recall if she was there or not, once I was resuscitated. But the very first thought that I had when I opened my eyes, and I don't know if I shared this in the interview, was, damn, they woke me up. Like, they really woke me up. Like, I was a little bit disappointed, but then I blurted out, "Are you okay?" Because I was more concerned about her than I was about my disappointment in being awakened, So then I asked the guy in front of me, because I could feel these people, that I could feel the woman, and I could feel this one person in front of me who was really concerned about, me living. I could feel them. So I asked the lady if she was okay. And then I looked up at the guy and asked him if he was okay. And he cut me off and was like, "No, are you okay?" And then somebody from the right side said, "You didn't feel that?" And I looked down because I didn't feel anything. And before I was about to just say, "No, I didn't feel anything." But when I looked down, I could see the pad where the defibrillator pads were being, pushed on my chest. And the indention of this little like gel pad was there. And I could see it very clearly that the indentions were the size of the defibrillators. So I knew that I was dead, and it kind of flooded into me in that moment. Like, oh, I really was dead. Like I really was out of here. I was, and it all kind of just flooded in and made sense. And there was another little funny moment that happened when I woke up. I leaned back after I tried to ask the lady if she was okay, and I leaned back and I was kind of just fading away, like I was going to sleep very, very fast. I was tired, and I looked to the left, and there was a white guy that had he needed to shave, but it was not a lot of hair. It was kind of stringy, and he looked like Shaggy from Scooby Doo. And he looked really, really big at me, and his eyes really wide, and he said, "What did you see?" And I was too tired. I was too tired to respond to him. So the bulk of what I saw was blackness. So I just gave him that. I just raised my eyes the same way that he raised his eyes, and I said, "Blackness." And it was just funny to me to do that. I don't know why I thought to do that in that moment.
Hopefully he sees your story online sometime and gets the full story.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
Incredible. I have so many questions, David. My first question about it is, a lot of people, whether they experience the void or the light or something, they'll use the term God or the creator or the universe. I mean, I know you had that cosmic experience. Did you ever at any point in your experience attribute the word God or like that conscious intelligence? Or for you, was it what was it for you?
It was like all. It felt like I was one with everything, and that felt like that. When people speak about God, to me, feeling one with everything, I felt like I was a part of God or a small piece of God in that state. I didn't feel separate from God. I didn't feel like I wasn't looking for God in any form outside of me. I felt as though I was experiencing God in that space. That's all to me was God, And but I studied every religion in my life. I have over close to 5,000 books or so, and so a lot of the ideas that are rooted in polarized religious orientations, I kind of discarded a lot of that. So I wasn't attached to a lot of those polarizing ideas or a lot of those externally based external God ideas. I was kind of intellectually moving towards an orientation that already kind of included me in the story, at least intellectually, but my life wasn't reflecting it. So that was part of what made me feel miserable, is that I felt like I should feel a part of all of this because I'd studied enough stuff to suggest that that's the feeling that you have when you wake up, but I just wasn't waking up, and I wasn't feeling a part of this, and none of my experience affirmed that I was a part of anything. I seemed to be on the outside, always looking in and wishing that I could perhaps participate more fully. And I think that was part of the pain as well of my experience.
Yeah. Well, I agree. There's so many questions. There's so many directions we could take this, but just hearing what you just shared, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that's really moving in a way, because I think a lot of people live life that way. I'm someone who has read a lot of religious and spiritual texts, and I haven't quite had an experience like that. I've had my own forms in meditation or prayer, but I think a lot of humanity probably feels like they're looking in, like they're not connected. They maybe even understand intellectually about God or spirituality, but it's really hard to not have that direct experience. So I'm curious, after having that experience, I'm assuming you feel like you're on the inside looking out, how has that shifted your relationship to death, to life, and just to hear how your life has really changed since having that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Now I feel like a part of it all, including the bad, right? But the bad now is not personal. It's just it's no different than me. It's no different than my body being at peace, and my mind being at peace, yet understanding that I have stomach acids that can burn, food that I ingest up. So is that even inside of me there's volatility, there's balance, there's good, there's bad. So for me, I'm not on the outside looking in anymore, and I'm not even aware of the ideas that make me separate as a part of it. I'm just a part of it now, and I see it all, including the bad, as just a part of it. It's not a lot for me to. It's just zeros and ones. It's almost like if I was a lung, would I hate my heart, or would I hate my stomach? It wouldn't make sense for me to, because I would have to understand that all of these organs together is what make the whole. And that's kind of how I look at life now. Is like, just because there are people here who don't understand what being a human being truly means, and they're really defending ideas that don't really require defending. They're just part of the system. There is no idea that it's worth defending here. It's all a part of us. It was introduced to you when you emerged here, and you took ownership of it. You decided that it was you, and now it's something that you feel like is worth defending, and it's not. It's just an idea that was introduced to you in this system, and there's a lot of them, and definitely not all of these ideas are worth fighting over, and we see that in our lives, but still we choose some ideas for whatever reason that seem to have more value, and it's all zeros and ones. It's all the same stuff, whether we're talking about trees or whether we're talking about souls. It's all the same stuff at the end of the day to me now. It's just information, It's just that this soul part seems to be the more fundamental part of it that actually remains intact when the physical breaks down.
So part of your integration, David, I think it's so fascinating. A lot of people have these near-death experiences, some powerful experience and downloads, and then how they integrate in their lives is like, a lot of people get divorced, a lot of people end friendships, relationships, or like they're just a different person. I think from what you're sharing, you had a pretty good grasp in many ways beforehand, but obviously all the anger you had and your body, yeah, I'm sure. Now, you said something earlier too, which was the void, which was responsive and love, and then you said you still feel connected to that void. I'm curious how, your last 4 years or whatever, how do you carry that connection? What does that look like in your life now?
It seems as though I've emptied myself of all of the connection to these concepts and ideas, and I've emptied myself of these ideas and concepts that exist here, that are possible here, and I only entertain them from the context of everything is possible, like I experienced when I was in the void. So if someone is sharing or wants me to center an idea, I can see that idea in its purity, I think, and from seeing it in the void, and then I can see it through how their nervous system. Just listening to how they've explained it, I can see how they've distorted that idea from how it's presented to me in its purity. And then there's a conversation that can happen that it's kind of like a walk back to the original idea, and they see it, and most people see it, and it's not really. I'm just interacting with the void more so than anything, which is a bunch of information, and they're allowing me to focus my attention, which is their attention, on the thing that they're questioning me about. And their questions, their words, their energy seems to kind of guide what comes out, but all I'm entertaining is zeros and ones. They're presenting me zeros and ones. The void is full of all possibility, and I'm just making the connection between the zeros and ones that they're presenting me and the repository of information that's available to us all, which is the void, And whenever you are away from it and you have confusion, just returning to it, even if momentarily or in a meditation, the confusion goes away the same way it did when I looked into it when I was disembodied. The void, all of the answers are there. And if you can imagine some way to access it through however means that feels, that resonates inside of you. Me is literally just thinking about it because I was there, and I can meditate and kind of just feel the closing your eyes, like that, the blackness and closing your eyes. Even if there's light, when you close your eyes, you see the blood in your lid through your eyes, and that looks like star forming regions. That was red and blue and all of this in space. So closing my eyes, oftentimes, is all I really need to do to feel that presence of that space, of that vastness, and listening to a trigger, which is another person. Some more, it guides the conversation or the words that I'm kind of hearing, or the ideas that I'm seeing or feeling from them in the void at the same time. Kind of. I know that's kind of wordy, but it just seems to kind of work like that.
Yeah. I mean, as you're talking about it, David, it reminds me, like, there's the themes of stuff like clarity versus confusion, or like, it reminds me of a form of Hinduism known as like jnana yoga, which is like discernment, and like kind of the breakthrough happens also intellectually, like the identification with the ego, with the I, or it kind of is what it makes me think of. And I'm curious if you could share a little bit more about your shift from, I know you didn't identify so much of as an activist, but just the identity of being a Black man, especially in America with all the racial history, and obviously something radically shifted for you in terms of how you identify, and also the anger. And I'm wondering if you could speak about the complexity of also the true racism and oppression and slavery that also is real, like how you make sense of all that now.
Yeah. For me, the shift was, the experience itself seemed to kind of just shake those ideas away from me, my attachment to them anyway. I understand that disparity, like you can look at disparity in America, and sometimes it's predictable along racial lines. So the race issue in America is a real one. I just think that how we've responded to it over time is what the issue is in my mind. Is that because even if as a Black man in the state that I was in, I wasn't coming up with solutions. I was only wanting to fight. I was only wanting to, there were no ideas about the other side of oppression. I was just in a state of constantly wanting to fight oppression, as if oppression was the only idea to entertain in my entire life. Like, love wasn't a part of that, equation. It wasn't centered. Hate was centered. Hate and fighting and addressing narratives, being angry about disparity versus trying to imagine solutions to a society, to the disparity. So for me, I was blinded by hate. And there are people who feel, that all of it is justified, and I don't have any problem, agreeing with that. All of the anger might have been justified, but what can you do with it? What can you build with it? The body is designed to feel an emotion for 30 to 90 seconds, not to feel it forever, and I was feeling hate indefinitely, 35 plus years, and it took a toll on me. So anybody who suggests that I was justified in that, to me, I can appreciate the compassion. I can appreciate all of that part, but it's not sensible to hold hate inside of you for that amount of time and not expect there to be some ramifications. Very physical, mental. I could not think clearly. I could not see any way out of depression, the anger, the sadness. There were very few moments of clarity. In those moments of clarity, it was like mostly just sadness. Whenever I wasn't angry, I was sad, So the change for me was really just seeing all of that, seeing that I killed myself, remembering the words when I was floating above my body, that my personality killed me, and knowing that personality, seeing how it was developed, seeing when I was doing the interview with you guys, and I really broke down sharing the memory of seeing the KKK. It wasn't, I didn't internalize it that way then. I made up a story, I guess, in that moment that didn't allow me to see it as a traumatizing event until I reshared it with as an adult, and realized that that was one of the major triggers that informed how I was supposed to behave here with in that way, the way that the adults around me were behaving with anger and hate and a lot of ignorance, from both sides. And I just jumped right into a game that was already being played before I came here, and that's what all of us do. We jump into narratives that were invented long before we came here. We jump into um, to these isms and ologies and that have been invented long before we came here. We never question the veracity of anything that we believe. We just believe it and we behave and act on it. And it creates problems that we never pause and say, could I have addressed this differently? We assume that the way that we do things here is just the way that things are done here. And from my experience, is like now when I see this tension or when I see problems, I don't have the same nervous system response that disallows you to respond in a more appropriate way, because the nervous system response is just telling you a story about how you initially had received that or integrated that idea. And if you first experienced it as a child, then you need you need to revisit it, because the child didn't have the tools to integrate these traumas and these ideas in any kind of sophisticated way. So they make up a very simple story that you'll believe for the rest of your life if you never revisit it. And so me revisiting all of these ideas now after the NDE, I saw all of it with clarity, without the nervous system response, without the trauma responses, without the bias. And it was just a silly orientation that I see as silly now. Even people who I respected before as very vocal activists, they just sound like broken records. And it sounds like their nervous system is being bombarded with a lot of toxic ideation all the time. And you hear it in their tone, you see it in their when they're expressing themselves. It's just trauma. It's all it is. It's trauma. And it's you can move people passionately with that, speaking in that way and talking about problems from that nervous system, triggered way. But it's not authentic. Nothing about that is authentic. You're triggered and you're just triggering other people with your trauma. That's not a foundation to build upon when you're trying to do something sustainable.
So how do we change that patterning? Because you've talked about here and in the film, like the power of our thoughts, right? Because I believe, all the great saints and mystics talk about the power of our thoughts. Literally, your thoughts of anger and hatred killed you. Then the opposite must be true, right? Thoughts of love, compassion, peace could actually arguably more powerful. How do you recommend for people how do we change our thoughts and start creating and manifesting what we want in this world, as opposed to so easily holding on to the traumas because our nervous systems resonate with fear so much?
However you detach from your earliest imprints, the orientation you gain from your earliest imprints, however you detach from these ideas, you have to just revisit them, question them, and detach from them. But from that point forward, once you see that these ideas are at the very least questionable, you can just entertain other ideas. You have more bandwidth to entertain other ideas once you start making room within yourself for other ideas. Like once I stopped holding on to anger and hate and the stories that led to that anger and hate, I had room for other ideas. And the most important idea that I made space for was me. And what is it? What am I? What am I doing here? What do I want to do here? What do I enjoy? What have I enjoyed thus far in this life? What do I see myself doing here for the remainder of the time that I have? And I see beauty. I see myself flourishing in ways that I've never seen before. And I feel it in my nervous system, the same way I felt hate and anger in my nervous system. And when I felt hate and anger in my nervous system, my reality was a pretty bad one. So now that I feel this hope and this love in my body in a different way than I ever have, my reality is a different one. Like, I don't come across people and situations that are negative very often. And when I do, because my nervous system isn't triggered, I can't really personalize it. I don't even have the tools to say that this person was angry at me and I should be feeling bad because I just assume that this person is traumatized and they're not operating in their perfection because of the bias and the narratives and the pain that they've experienced in their life the same way I experienced it. So I feel compassion for people who communicate with me in toxic ways now, because I understand that the toxicity is inside of them, and it's hard to shake it, and it's not their fault. A lot of these narratives are presented to them the same way they were presented to me, and they're a victim of it. So I don't have to take any piece of experience here now personally. There's no part of this experience that I have to take personally anymore, because the parts of my brain, I think, that had that tendency to aggressively tell me stories and lies about what was happening to me here, it seems to be downregulated. I don't engage it the same way.
I think that's so cool, David, because you have a real grasp on like emotional intelligence. It's in this space and around near-death experiences, there's like the spiritual, some people it's religious, but the spiritual perspective. But then I always think that the emotional intelligence piece, the psychological piece, the emotional realm is also really important around how to integrate. And both Elliot and I are marriage and family therapists. So we've worked with clients and, talking about emotional regulation, how to work with our thoughts, our emotions. I've taught for 10 years in the California prison system here, and we teach like a mindfulness-based emotional intelligence violence prevention program with men who have life sentences. And a big part of it is like, I noticed that a lot of these men in prison who are coming to these self-help groups do have a spiritual or religious foundation. If you're sentenced to life in prison, a lot of people do have a wake-up moment of like, well, then I'm going to change my life and just really reevaluate. And a lot of them, I would say, are similar to what you're saying, David, about like letting go of that game, this like us versus them mentality. I'm the victim and you did this to me, or, that's how the gang world on the streets, the gang world in prison, it's all predicated on this kind of polarity. So I love the fact that you're bringing back not just a spiritual message that everything's connected, we're all orbs of light, but also like, how do we let go of these games and these mental constructs and identities that don't serve us anymore?
Yeah, I think it's important. I think for me, I've entertained a lot of abstract thoughts and spiritual thoughts my entire life, metaphysical stuff my entire life. So my experience was pretty, to me, it was pretty grounded. Like, I didn't have a lot of ideas that originate inside of David's trauma or David's bias. I didn't have any of those ideas there, really. It was just space and love and vastness. There weren't things that I had to figure out from the perspective of me being in the way of anything. It was just me receiving information that I hadn't really received in that way before. So to me, grounding it was the most important part of when I returned back, was to ground it in how can I live better? How can it make me feel better? I was sick. So if I'm sick, and I knew that I was not just physically sick in my body, but I was also sick in my mind in a lot of fundamental ways by accepting a lot of this extremely polarized thought. It's irrational thought. It's not true. And if you still believe it when you can rationalize that it's not true, you're crazy. I was being crazy. I was being delusional. There was no foundation for these thoughts in reality, yet I believed them strongly enough to allow them to make me sick, to kill me ultimately. So for me, the importance of speaking about the emotional part was, for one, the sentence that I heard when I was floating above myself was, your personality killed you. That immediately moved me in a direction of wanting to understand how the mind can do that to me, how it did it to me, and how it can do it to other people, so I can help them not do that. I'm the fool who believed these concepts and these ideologies and these polarized thoughts so seriously that it destroyed me, literally. you don't have to do it. You probably are experiencing it now, but you can stop it once you understand what's happening from somebody who took it all the way to the extreme and allowed these thoughts to kill them. Some people are just angry right now. They're just depressed right now. I died. So for me, understanding this is like just to share with people who are moving in that direction. So like, this is how it happens. This is the scientific stuff that I'm starting to understand now. Some of the brain function stuff that I'm starting to understand now. And I think it's important for me to ground it in that way, because we often like to be in the sky, and like people want to talk about mystical stuff, but they don't know how their mind works. They don't know why they're thinking the thoughts that they have. They're thinking, and it's like, how can you build upon nothing? And then we go all the way up in space now. We're all the way up in the highest realms of thinking and abstract thought, but you don't know how your heart works. You don't know how your lungs work. You don't know how your brain works. You don't know what your nervous system is. You don't know none of this stuff. So for me, it was important for me moving forward in this life, if I'm going to try to help people, is to at least understand inside of myself how I got broken, and that's exactly what happened to me. I was broken, mind, body, and my spirit. Like, my hope was broken, So I understand how it happened, and I can help people get out of that. You can back out of that, just by not, continuing to move forward. And it sounds simple, but some people have reached out to me in the comments. Even some people have reached out to me and said that they've been seeing therapists for agoraphobia or for anxiety, and they watch this one video, and they don't have agoraphobia anymore. They don't have the anxiety, or and I'm still like, go see your therapist. Make sure that you have that conversation with them, so that you can get confirmation from your therapist that yes, you have moved through it, versus just assuming that you're moving through it stuff and then running into the same obstacles a week later, a month later, a year later, because you truly haven't integrated a knowing about what's going on. So for me, it's a combination of all of it now. There's definitely a spiritual component, a deep study in the metaphysical aspects of this life, and trying to piece together the history of humanity and the history of our spiritual quest. And the breadcrumbs that have been left for us, they've been left for us thousands of years now. It's time to really start digging through it and putting the story back together, because the information is there. But so many of us are so biased that we're not interested in putting the puzzle back together. We're interested in our puzzle pieces and our puzzle pieces alone. Forget about putting the whole thing back together. But if we all, from all over the planet, took our puzzle pieces and start plugging them back together, we would realize what the Egyptians and the Greeks realized, is that this race stuff, it's about soul, it's about virtues, it's about a much higher thinking. The Greeks and Egyptians are not recorded as having direct war with each other, because they were working together. And we're not taught that. We're not taught that the Ptolemies and the Pharaohs both considered God kings. They were both considered people. They weren't regular humans. They were humans with down-regulated brain functions, so that they could actually make decisions that were non-centric. So they were people who had gone through something like a near-death experience, so that they could make decisions that were better for a collective versus better for a tribe.
Nice, David. That is awesome. The way to bring in the Greeks and the Egyptians. It's yeah. It's I just feel like your story and how you articulate. One, I think so many people in the comments were like the most liked comment is like, I could listen to this guy talk for 2 more hours, and like everyone's like, yeah. but people are very compelled by just this, how you're articulating it. And I think another piece is, I just like that there's such a message of hope around like choice, like we have choice and we can actually choose at a certain level. You were given that download and that peek into the void and all of it. But, so it's like, how do we make changes in our lives, And, I'm so glad people are reaching out to you directly too, and that you're interacting with them and talking to them is I'm sure very meaningful for them, and I'm sure for you.
Yeah, it is. Like I was saying, it's cathartic, because sometimes I'm hearing them saying the things that I was saying, to myself when I was in my lowest point. And I know what they need to hear, because I know now what I needed to hear. And hope is like, people center words, that are centric to their religion, like Jesus and God and, stuff like that. But when you want to help every human being, you don't want to offend any one of them. You don't want to turn anybody away. So I don't want to use terms that automatically confuse a person that may not be familiar with that term, So that's another reason why I try to use the language that I do, is so that everybody can benefit from what I'm saying. As I don't want just one group of people to benefit from what I'm saying. I want the people who have the least amount of hope. If there's any demographic that I want to benefit disproportionately, it will be the people who have the least amount of hope. If you don't have any hope, I want you to benefit more from what I'm saying than everybody else, because that's what killed me, is not having hope. So I don't have any message for any group of people, any religious orientation or any philosophical. I don't have a message for any specific group of people. And I see the encouragement from, Christian people, and I don't have any problem with it. I love everybody to use they're encouraging me to use the words Jesus in some of the comments, or use the words God. I can use Jesus. I don't have a problem using the word Jesus, because he's, to me, in terms of this walk, there are stories that we have that are good stories, and there are stories that we have that polarize people. The message that Jesus brought to humanity wasn't a polarizing one, but the religious people who came after, they are very polarizing. They polarize a lot of the ideas that were taught about Jesus, and to the point where there's a gazillion sects even within Christianity itself. And I don't say this to offend Christians. I say this to highlight the thing that you're wanting me to do is the thing that Jesus didn't do, and that was to separate himself and people who respected and loved him from everybody else. He didn't do that. So I don't have a tendency in me to say now, especially, I don't have a tribal imperative here. If there is a tribal imperative, is anybody who understands that love and oneness is important. Outside of that, there is no other race, skin color, hair color, all of that makes up 0.000% of the human genome. Is scientifically insignificant, yet it's one of the most significant variables in a society, in this society in particular, that governs, or you can predict a lot of stuff based on race in this society, yet it's a scientifically insignificant, idea. So it's like we have to wake up and stop centering these constructs that don't have any real validity in life. They never did. There were Black Egyptians and white Egyptians. There were Black Greeks and white Greeks. Slavery in ancient times wasn't predicated on race. A lot of the stuff that we believe now in terms of racial polarization, these thoughts and ideas, we just pushed them on to ancient history, and they just didn't exist. The idea of whiteness and blackness as we know it now is probably just a couple hundred years old. Even whiteness was separated by nationality, even phenotype. There were different looking white people. In America, it was convenient to invent the word white to create polarization between white and other non-white people, because it's easy to manage people fighting each other than to an homogenous group of people who want the same things. It's hard to get the masses to be under control if all of them are saying, hey, we need these same things. But when you can convince one group that their needs are this, and the other group that their needs are this, so that this is important to me, and we have the same physiology. We have the same nervous system. What's important to one human being is important to another. Anything that says different is just ideological nonsense.
So I want to echo a couple of the comments that I've heard that I read on the channel. But are you thinking about writing a book? Are you writing a book?
Yeah, slowly. The idea is kind of what we're talking about. It's still more grounding, higher, like metaphysical, spiritual concepts, and it's the idea that I'm playing with is called the fourth attention. And I view the body as the first attention. And that's where I experience is solely inside the body initially, and the organs educate us. You learn what hunger is. Hunger is by the stomach growling and sending signals to you that, that your sugar is low, that you need. We learn the body through just being in it. That's the first attention. Second attention is affinity. Like now the stomach is telling you you're hungry, but you're saying, I want Doritos. That's the second attention. Those concepts that are abstracted from the organs that send you the information in its rawness. Then you abstract it and turn it into a preference or, an idea that was presented to you in life that doesn't really mean what your stomach is telling you or your heart is telling you. It means what it's distilled into in the society that you're raised in, and what the options that are presented to you. That's the second attention. The third is just totally, it's the philosophies. Is black is better than white. White is better than black. That's the third attention. These are just totally man-made concepts that are not rooted in your body at all. They're just ideological concepts that take you outside of your body, which is reality, which would explain things more clearly and more in a grounded way. You're out of that now. Now you're in the ethos. You're just dealing with all of the possibilities that exist here, and you're pulling them into you instead of just focusing on what it is you want from this experience. There's infinite possibility here, and we hear these things. They get centered in society. They get put on the radio, the TV, and so what would just be a random possibility out there becomes a higher probability for us to think because it's being repeated in the media all the time. So everybody starts thinking the same stuff because we're all being presented the same information. That's the third attention to me, and it's the hardest one to get through. The body is going to tell you the truth. The body is always going to tell you the truth, except some of the storytelling. But even the storytelling is rooted in an experience, a physical experience that you had that you can go back to and find out the truth. But this stuff that's out there, all of the possibilities that are out there that we bring into ourselves, that stuff isn't beholden to us. It's just ideas. It's just information. It's just zeros and ones, And but the fourth attention is what I gained when I left the body, and I was able to see those ideas. It's nonsense. It's just zeros and ones. There's just possibilities that exist out there, not something that I have to take into myself and entertain so deeply. The second attention, I know it is temperance. Like the second attention, if your body says you're hungry and then you say, well, I like Doritos, temperance says, okay, that idea is there and it's real, but temperance is like, this idea isn't coming from my body. So if I overindulge in this idea, then my body is going to have a response to that. So temperance and certain virtues just simply become important in understanding how the body works and how these ideas go back to the body ultimately. So we have these really, really, really crazy ideas that don't have any origin in the body at all, but they trigger certain parts of the body, the nervous system. It's just going to ultimately agitate your nervous system and your brain, your body, your energy to the point where there's going to be some kind of disease, But if you ground every idea that's out there back into the second and first attention, the body doesn't hurt so bad from receiving those ideas. But the fourth attention is what allows you to see those ideas as non-threatening to the body, as you turn them into poison, but the fourth attention can turn it into water. Your nervous system might turn it into poison. Your ideology might turn it into poison, but your fourth attention can turn it into zeros and ones. But as long as you have these foreign ideas rooted in you, then every suggestion that's out there becomes real to your body, mind, ego, your nervous. You respond to it, and it can kill you the same way that it's suggested to you that it can kill you. But when you don't take these suggestions as real, it's just information. Even those connections sometimes aren't as real. I mean, you hear all the time people who have near-death experiences might have been prior to that told that they had 2 months to live from cancer or whatever, and they live way beyond that. Then they get told that they don't have cancer anymore. It's like none of that is scientific. None of that can be explained scientifically. This cancer's metastasized all over this person's body. Now, after some experience, a month later, they don't have cancer anymore. They've been given a death sentence of a month, 2 months to live. Now there's no sign of cancer. That's not explained through science. So what I'm explaining with the fourth attention is that some of the suggestions that are being given to us, they're not rooted in the body. They're just rooted in, what do we study this stuff? In vacuums. Most of the bodies that we study to understand how the body works are dead. It's a snapshot. So the living body forms things that the dead body, or that the vacuum, that the inanimate body that you study to come to these theories, the living body does a lot more things than that. So it's hard to me, it's hard to start speaking about what's possible inside of a living body when all you know is, what you've distilled inside of kind of vacuum tubes in your research processes, because we don't really study living, thinking people when we're trying to understand a lot of how this stuff comes to work. We cadavers, what the medical fields are filled with. They're not understanding real time how the body works. And I think that if we were able to start seeing some of this stuff which the science is starting to catch. Are these like the UVA, the cognitive research center they have there? A lot of universities are starting to look at these strange experiences that people have, near-death experiences, and these weird knowings and that people are having differently, because it's something to it, and it isn't always explainable through rigid orientations towards science, But it's important to understand science in the most rigid way in the best way that we've gotten it right now, and some of the ways that we have it right now are rigid, and I don't necessarily view them as right, but from there is where you make your deviation. You don't just start with nothing and just start imaginatively pulling ideas out of the ethers and think that you have something that can counter science. That's not what I'm trying to do here, and that's not what I'm proposing. Is that science isn't real. What I'm proposing is that your experience is yours. So even if scientists tell you something that you think you're supposed to abide by, your reality doesn't have to be limited to that suggestion. And by no means, and we've seen too many examples of people who've received those suggestions and then experienced something totally otherwise. So,
wow, that's pretty amazing, David. I'm very curious. I think a lot of people are. Just once this book comes about, whenever, no pressure. I know you're taking your time, but these are some powerful concepts, and writing is just another form. Like, clearly you're very articulate, and I think that's so cool, and it's a gift, and people get a lot. And because a lot of comments also are like, this guy should be a speaker, he should be a teacher or a narrator, something. But writing is a beautiful gift too. The last question I have for you is, again, just we're bringing up some comments. There's a few people that commentators wrote specifically around the woman who you saw, who was really scared and terrified, and people are like, whatever happened to that woman? I'm curious. Did you ever make contact with her, or any follow-up with her, or no?
My suspicion is that it was my aunt. My mother has a twin sister. She was sick during that time, and she I don't think she had died at that point, but I think she was in a bad state, like maybe even an induced coma. I'm not 100% sure of all the details, but I know she wasn't in a good state. She had a few heart attacks and I think strokes as well. And like she was declining, and I think that they may have put her in a state that to help ease the pain as she was transitioning. But for some reason, I think it was her, because it looked like her, and I thought pretty highly of her. So if it was her, I would have did what I did, and that was keep turning back and trying to, talk to her. I wanted her to feel better. So it being her makes sense, because that's if it was in my life and I knew who it was and it was her, I would have responded that same way. I wouldn't have been able to just go on and not look back at my aunt, because I really cared about her. She was my mom's twin sister, and I viewed her almost like a second mother. So it was like, I don't know if it was a physical person. I don't know if it was just her energy, her spirit trying to help me not. the decision to just keep going because my attention was on space and on moving through space. I didn't, in that space, I didn't remember being a human being except when I looked at her. And I didn't remember any human context except when I looked at her. And so looking at her just, it just made my attention stop going out into space and started going back to Earth, you know. And you know, and I think that that's honestly what created the opportunity for me to be, to come back here. Was my attention was almost primarily on her, even though I was so fixated on space and wanted to travel and all this stuff. But I kept, also wanting her to feel better. So it was like the compassion part of it that it wouldn't leave. And I shared that part with someone, and I don't know if I mentioned this in the interview, but that person was familiar with a lot of Eastern philosophy, and they said, you had a Guan Yin experience, and then I didn't understand, so I got them to explain, and they said, Guan Yin is it's like the goddess of compassion, and during her elevation, she heard the cries of humanity, and it broke her heart, and she turned back and went back to Earth and said she would never leave until everyone wakes up. And it felt like that when I was feeling, when the person explained that to me, and then when I considered a woman, felt like my aunt, it felt like that. Like the opportunity that was in front of me was vast, and I don't really think it's gone anywhere, but the responsibility to make her feel better and to have more clarity about what was happening, that was stronger than my desire to just move on. So I ended up coming back out of compassion for another human being that I didn't, in my life, I didn't think I liked human beings enough to forego heaven, to forego some kind of heavenly experience to come back to deal with human beings. But apparently I did. I didn't like human beings, but apparently I loved human beings enough to make a decision like that, because that's what I ultimately did. I made a decision that brought me back here. And I was so depressed when I came back. I was deeper. I was more depressed than I'd ever been in my life when I came back here, because I'd actually saw something else, and that's what I preferred. I preferred to be there. And coming back here, I didn't even know how to integrate. I didn't know how to feel about any of this. It just didn't make sense. It made less sense than it did before, and I didn't want to participate. So coming back here, even though it was a decision that I seemed to have made just on an attention level, because I think people get really imaginative with choices, and decisions, and in reincarnation departments, and like really human descriptions of afterlife experiences that perhaps, the way that I look at it now is that it's all true, right? But there's a root experience from which a lot of the ideas emerge from. And I think a lot of people don't go to the root. We develop bias even as babies. Like babies at 2 months have favorite colors or favorite toys. Like they already are learning bias, And so I think that even as an idea, you can gravitate to something in a way that almost energetically creates bias, And I don't think I gravitate to anything anymore. Like I was comfortable in the void. I wasn't afraid of the light. Actually, it was beautiful. It felt like love. I was floating towards it when I didn't move. When I didn't intend myself to move anywhere, it felt like the light had a pull. But if I wanted to go somewhere, I could. That pull didn't have an effect on me. I could go where I wanted to go. And but it felt like a strong star, which would have a gravitational pull. It felt like a light, like I was. And if I didn't control my movement, I would float that way. And I don't know if it was the pull of the light or the pull of something else, that was there. But there was a movement. When I wasn't moving, there was a pull, and it seemed to be up towards that light.
So incredible,
So
David.
cool.
It's really amazing. And I know we're about at our hour mark. So I just want to thank you and ask you if you had any other thoughts, you'd want to share with our audience, any final things, and Elliot, if you have another question, feel free to jump in.
My last question, David, and then, any other thoughts you want to share before we wrap up, but just what you were saying about the light and, what do you think would have happened had you let yourself drift to the light? Or because I love that your curiosity, that there's that freedom, right? Almost like free will or free choice, and you were that baby exploring. But I think some people, these NDEs, they just go right to the light. I know you were entertaining it, but if you had any thoughts about that.
My thoughts were that it was the reset button. It was the go back button. That was my thought. It was the go back button. And I didn't really, it was the doorway back into experience, and I didn't want that experience anymore. I wanted the experience I was having, which was vast and perfect and full of clarity and not a lot of this, rigid stuff and tribal stuff and separate experience. Like in the body now, I know that there is no separation, but I think most people in their bodies want to experience separation, and that's perfect. That's fine. I think that's kind of the point. But in the experience of separation, I think the opportunity is to still see that there's oneness, and then it makes the experience of separation so much easier because now you don't have obstacles anymore. You don't run into wall. There are no walls when there's no separation. When you view yourself as something distinct that has its own agenda, everything else is an other. It's an other thing, and it's a potential obstacle. But when you view yourself as just simply a part of something that's one, there are no obstacles. Everything else is just a part of you, and I can move through this life with so much less tension, with so much less reaction to anything because it's all me, So the beauty of this experience to me is not just totally in assuming yourself to be this individual ego, body, mind, and just doing what an individual ego, body, mind can do, which is very limited. One body, one human, one mind can do very next to nothing on this planet to change anything. But when you know that you're the same as everybody else, and everything that you are reflects that, then people see you as them. The resonance just happens, and then you're able to actually maybe say something that matters, because it's not just your tribe that you're speaking about or yourself that you're speaking about or your body, mind, ego. It's about everybody. It's about everybody. It's about me loving being a part of you, me loving being one with you, me hoping that this oneness becomes even more beautiful so that there's less tension in it. There are less ideas that are quote unquote negative ideas. And I think the ideas that are negative ideas are inside of us, so they're going to exist outside of us. And until we stop centering all of this stuff, same like that, activism to me is what activism does is it brings awareness to problems, and it's always in their mission. Our mission is to bring awareness to a problem, right? You never see our mission is to put $5 billion towards building institutions that fix everything. You're never going to explicitly hear them state a number about how much they're going to put towards fixing something. Even in what happened in Haiti, they made $5 billion in the environmental crisis that happened in the earthquake. But I think they built 3 or 4 homes. So it's like these organizations are corrupt, and they're not really. Once you create an organization that is a cause-based organization, and you have employees, you have a budget, you have the bulk of the work is just to keep the organization going, to keep the employees paid, to keep to keep printing up pamphlets, to keep paying for commercials to make people aware of your problem that you think is the only problem that matters in the universe. And And all you're doing is making people aware of problems and you're paying your bills. That's what these organizations do. They pay the bills of the people who work there, and they make everybody else aware of a problem. They don't offer solutions. They don't. And that's the critique that I have with activism. It's not, and that's not sweeping, because there are some organizations that actually feed people. That's something tangible. Like if you're not doing anything tangible at all, you're not doing anything but presenting toxic ideas to a system that already has enough of them.
Yeah. It's really interesting, and it's part of what our global challenge is right now, I think, collectively, our country, the whole world. I just want to thank you so much, David, for coming on even kind of last minute. And I feel like we could do this for hours. And it makes me so happy, that you came out to LA, we filmed you, and that hundreds of thousands of people. And and that some people are like, I want this video to have 1 million views. It's like, dream too, and I think it'll get there. And it's a beautiful, you're sharing your gift and your story, and it's just want to say thank you.
Thank you. Like the trip played a big role in me gaining more clarity. Like since I left LA, there's not been a single day that I didn't end the day better than I started it. I'm gaining more clarity about everything every day, about myself, about people around me. I went through some periods where I thought that I was going to be losing some relationships, and I just asked myself, why would I have to, really? And if I could communicate to them who I am and what I am probably better than I could before, then why wouldn't that help maintain those relationships? You know what I'm saying? And I just did that, and I fixed a lot of the stuff, that I thought was going to end, be problematic enough to cause me to end relationships. I'm fixing that stuff now because I don't have a dog in the fight. So really all I have to do is communicate with them and understand what their dog in the fight is. I'm not the same person, so I'm not going to dance the same way with them. So I just need to understand the new dance we're going to do, and let's do that. And they need to understand that I'm not doing any old toxic dances or aggressive dances anymore. It just doesn't work for me. But and sometimes not participating in the relationship the way that both parties have gotten used to it, even if it's toxic, it feels like you're not loving them anymore. And it's just because I'm not participating in that way anymore. Even if it's toxic, they're used to that interaction. And that sometimes that toxic stuff is love. It becomes it becomes love. It becomes what that love looks like and feels like. And it's just what they're used to. It's an addiction almost. And I'm just not addicted to toxicity. I'm just not addicted to dysfunctional behavior and relating to people anymore. I have no attachment to any of it. It doesn't work for me. So even the ways that I used to communicate before that I was comfortable in, I'm not anymore. So that might make distance from somebody, but when they realize that what I am open to is so much better than what I was open to before, and we try it, then they're like, oh, he still feels the same about me. He's just not it's not gonna look the way it used to look anymore.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, David. It's just echoing what Elliot said. It's just such a gift, your story, your experience, and the way you so generously shared it with us. And it's just incredible to see how many people are watching it and really getting impacted and touched and moved. And people are sharing it with their friends and family. There's other people who identify with you in sense of having a lot of anger and grappling with what to do with that. So thank you so much. And we'd love to have you back on the podcast again and just stay in touch.
Definitely. Yeah. You two are my brothers, man. So we're going to definitely do it again soon. I feel connected to you forever now. So, and just how warm you've been to me throughout this entire process. I love you, and I'll definitely be on the podcast anytime you ask. I'll be on.
Awesome. Love you too, David. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Love you too.
And talk soon.
Indeed.